Hello and welcome to today's lesson. Today we're talking about SSH tunneling with Plink on a Windows host. I have this illustration so that you guys can follow along much easier. And so on the left we have this Windows host, which is the computer that I'm currently logged into. We have an Ubuntu server, which we're going to use as the pivot point because we have access to it via SSH credentials. And this is the Windows server that we're trying to RDP to. For those that don't know about pivoting, pretty much essentially, it's using a middle person that has access to the outsider, so to speak, and also the exclusive client or the protected client on the other side, which is in this case, or not client but server. On this case is our Windows server here. And so what we're gonna do with the SSH tunnel is send information to the Ubuntu server. For those that don't know what tunneling is, and then since, like I explained, this Windows server or this Ubuntu server has access to the Windows server, it's gonna relay that information that we just sent over to the Windows server. The Windows server then replies to the Ubuntu, and then the Ubuntu server then uses this road that we created, the SSH tunnel, so that we receive the information. So essentially, imagine you're getting hired, or you're going through the hiring phase because you want a job, and so you're the person trying to get hired. The Ubuntu server is HR, and then the Windows server is the hiring manager. Now, the hiring manager, let's say he's super not cool and he's an asshole, or maybe because it's company policy. You're not able to talk to the server or to the hiring manager directly. You got to go through HR. And then HR, you send information or ask a question to HR. Then HR then sends that question to the hiring manager. The hiring manager replies to HR, and then HR relays that information back to you. That's pretty much what pivoting is. You're just using a middle person so that the outsider, us, can talk to the insider, which is the Windows server or the hiring manager. So that's it. We're gonna use, like I said, PuTTY for the tunneling, SSH tunneling. But not PuTTY, Plink, sorry. And so I have the command here. For those that don't know what tunneling is, it's pretty much the ability to include information inside a tunnel. So imagine it's a highway and there's a tunnel. That tunnel is able to include any type of traffic. It could be, blue cars, semi trucks, minivans, SUVs, all kinds of traffic. And then that traffic then goes out the other end to the other side of the tunnel. And so, like I said, let's create that tunnel so that we can use the tunnel to send information to the Windows server. And I'll explain that, how it works here in a second. So let's connect to the Ubuntu server with Plink, which at the same time will create the SSH tunnel. So Plink SSH D950, and I'll explain what this means. Ubuntu, which is the user on the Ubuntu server, and then we're just going to connect to it. And by the way, the IPs that I use on the commands are not going to be exactly the same as the illustration, but the same concepts apply. So let's just log in. And there we go, we're logged in. As you can see, Ubuntu at web 0. And so with that command, we just created the highway, the tunnel that connects the Windows host to the Ubuntu server. And like I said, on the command, we also included dynamic port 9050. This pretty much means it's like an on-ramp. If you guys ever been on a highway, which there's a very likely chance that you've been on a highway, you can't just teleport to the highway. right? You can't just teleport to it. You got to go through like back roads, and then essentially you go through back roads, and then you get on an on-ramp to be able to access the highway. And so this port 9050 is pretty much the on-ramp, which allows us to use the main highway, so to speak. And so that's what 9050 means. It's the on-ramp. So any traffic that wants to use this highway has to use on-ramp 9050. Okay, awesome. So let me just. Okay, awesome. So let me try to RDP to the Windows server so that you guys can see that I can't log in. So 1972, 16.5.12 or 172, 16.5.19, and the connection goes nowhere. Even though we already made the highway with Plink and we created the on-ramp, this RDP client, which comes pre-installed with Windows, it's still trying to directly connect to the Windows server, which, like I said, we're not able to because we're not part of that network. If you see at our IPs, we have 10, 10, 15, 5, and then this Windows server is only part of 17, 16.5.0/24, or whatever the network is. And so we're not able to access that network. We're not part of that network, and we don't have any routes to it. Even if we did, like I said, servers usually have like a list, so to speak, of allowed clients that's able to communicate with it. And so unfortunately, we're not part of it. And that's why we need this highway to be able to talk to it. And I'll explain that here in a second. And so when we try to RDP to it directly, or try to RDP to it, the RDP client on Windows thinks it tries to directly connect to it, which we can't. And so we have to tell this RDP client to use this on-ramp, which then it connects to the highway. There's some RDP clients like AnyDesk. I believe it has a proxy setting, which inside the client you can tell it to use the on-ramp, or detour, so to speak, the traffic to the on-ramp. But this native client that comes with Windows doesn't have that feature. And so we're going to have to use something called Proxy Fear, which is free to use. I think you get like a 30-day evaluation. And so we're going to have to use Proxy Fear, I think that's how you pronounce it, to tell this RDP client that instead of trying to directly connect to the Windows server, for it to use this on-ramp. So before we do that, we have to tell Proxyfire that there's an on-ramp, right? Because Proxyfire and Putty or Plink, they don't communicate. They don't know about each other. So Plink knows about the on-ramp 9050, but Proxyfire doesn't. And so we gotta tell Proxyfire that there's an on-ramp created by Plink. And so we're gonna go to what was it? Proxy servers, and then add. And the on-ramp is on our computer at our local host 127.0.0.1, and the on-ramp number is 9050. For the protocol, we're going to use SOCKS 4. SOCKS 5, you can use it if you want to have the ability to have domain resolution, but we don't care because we're using IPs. So we're going to use SOCKS 4. And so that's that. There we go. So with this proxy server setting, we're pretty much telling Proxyfire that there's an on-ramp on our computer. But even then, if we try to connect, the computer's still trying to directly connect to the Windows server because it's still not using Proxyfire. So we got to tell Proxyfire to capture or intercept, so to speak, traffic coming from this client or this software RDP, and then tell it to when it tries to connect to the Windows server, instead of instead of RDP sending the information directly here, a Proxyfier is going to intercept that traffic and then redirect it to the on-ramp. That way you can use the highway that we created here, the SSH tunnel. So let's tell Proxyfier that, let's just call it pivot point. That any traffic coming from our RDP client, this RDP client here, which comes with Windows, I believe it's called MSTSC. Directed or going to 16, what was the IP of it? 172.16.5.19. With the target port of 3389, that's for RDP. We're going to tell it for it to use the on-ramp that we created earlier, which is this proxy socks 127.0.0.1. You can't see the port number, the on-ramp number, but it's here. And so now, anytime that we use this RDP client to connect to the server, instead of the traffic going directly and trying to connect, Proxyfier is going to intercept that RDP request or connection, sorry. And instead of going directly, it's going to go and be intercepted by proxy agent. Then proxy agent is going to tell, hey, this RDP connection is coming from mstsc.exe, which is this RDP client, to the host 172.16.5.19 to the port 3389 or 3389, yeah, which is RDP. And so grab that traffic and then direct it to the on-ramp here. And so then the RDP connection goes through the on-ramp. It gets on the highway. It gets here. And then because the Ubuntu server has access to the Windows server, the information gets relayed to the Windows server. The Windows server accepts that, sends it back to the Ubuntu server, and then the Ubuntu sends it back to us through this highway. Right here to this highway, it takes the on-ramp back to us, and then back to our computer here. So let's do that. Let's just connect now. So as you can see, it tries to ask for a password. We'll just log into it. Click yes. And now we're able to RDP to this host. And if I do ipconfig, you'll see that the IP on this is 172.16.5.19, which indeed is the Windows server here. So let me explain a little bit more what's going on. A lot of people get confused with this. With the connection to the client or to the Windows server, when we send the traffic to this on-ramp, it gets to the Ubuntu server. When we send the RDP connection, the Ubuntu server then creates its own connection to the Windows server. A lot of people think that because we sent the request or the RDP connection originated from our Windows client, it thinks that that's the source IP once it reaches the Windows server, and that's not true. As far as the Windows server is concerned, we don't exist. We don't exist at all. When we RDP, let me just disconnect. Let me go to RDP. When we connect through RDP, just like that, the traffic goes from our computer. It gets redirected by Proxyfier to the on-ramp 9050. It goes to the highway. It gets here, and then our SOCKS, our SSH tunnel, tells the Ubuntu server, hey, create a connection between you and the Windows server. Create an RDP connection, and then any information, send it back to the Ubuntu server. As far as the Windows server is concerned, it doesn't know about us. The connection is between the Ubuntu server and the Windows server. And so the RDP connection is made between the Ubuntu and the Windows. Windows thinks it's the RDP connection originated from the Ubuntu. It sends the information back, and then the SOX tunnel or the SSH tunnel is telling any information regarding this RDP connection you get from the Windows server, send it back to us. And like I said, it travels to this highway, to the on-ramp, and then back to us. And that's pretty much how it works. So that's it. That's pivoting. It's SSH tunneling using RDP, or using SSH tunnel to RDP to a server that we don't have direct access to, but we managed to get access to it through this this pivot point, this middleman, HR. And so that's pretty much it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope it made sense. And thank you for watching. By the way, I have another video on my channel explaining how to do exactly this, but without using Proxyfire, which in my opinion is a lot better method. And I'll link it on the description, or you'll probably see it somewhere on the screen right now. Anyways, thank you for watching.